his lawyer.
Is the Department of Justice that you are running independent from the White House?
The Department of Justice, like every single department in the executive, is part of the executive.
You have said that the weaponization fund is a moot issue. Is that your position?
Yes, it is a moot issue. I suppose if President Trump's counsel sought to enforce it, they potentially could.
Including the weaponization fund?
Well, they could try to enforce the contract.
Do you personally believe that someone who forcibly entered the U.S. Capitol, assaulted law enforcement, should be rewarded with taxpayer money? Yes or no?
I can't answer it yes or no.
Can't answer a yes or no. A lot of senators, a lot of experts, certainly people who are supportive of police would say, yeah. Answer it no. Duh. Blanche was also asked about these new subpoenas, fresh this week, sent to New York Times journalists. Trump has also threatened now to go back after the broadcast licenses for ABC and NBC. This is over the network's decision, which, of course, in a free society like ours, is their independent press decision over whether or not to give him airtime. And this wasn't exactly an election night speech or a war address. This was a political presentation he wanted to make, and he's mad that they didn't deem it newsworthy enough to bump other programming. So he is retaliating with these threats. Blanche's nomination does hang in the balance. Republican Senator Cornyn reportedly on the fence. A defection could derail the nomination out of the committee, which is now down to a one-vote margin. I enjoy our chance sometimes at the end of the week with a little more time to go into these things. I haven't heard from you yet on what we saw in that nomination hearing and how you view now with this new testimony, Blanche's prospects and qualifications to be AG for good.
I think it's clear, Blanche has testified yesterday, he is Trump's lawyer, tried to correct himself, but that's his mentality. Keep in mind that he just gave a press conference just a couple of weeks ago where what he said to the president was, "I love you, sir." His fealty is totally devoted to the president and not, sadly, to his oath of office, which requires him to pledge to preserve and protect the Constitution, which is, the time-honored approach of people who have been honored and selected for the position, which he will now sadly fill if confirmed.
Yeah. We think about what has been a decline in the integrity and, frankly, sometimes just the professional quality of appointees for Donald Trump in the second term. Bill Barr was controversial for certain reasons, but I want to just show a comparison of him to Blanche on some of these issues. Take a look.
I repeatedly told the president in no uncertain terms that I did not see evidence of fraud. I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bull.
Today, a grand jury sitting in the Eastern District of North Carolina returned an indictment against James Comey on 2 counts.
I love working for President Trump.
I love you, sir.
Do you see a contrast or a decline here?
Oh, extraordinary. Bill Barr, for, whatever quarrels people have about some of the decisions he made, he made them on a legal basis. And he was a good counselor to the president, trying to explain to the president where the guardrails were, what the evidence was, what the appropriate response to things were. There are no people in the White House, this White House, who take that road. The reality is they know, as Jay Clayton proved yesterday, that if they say anything that's contrary to the narratives, the false narratives that the president is so attached to, that they'll be fired, as the chief lawyer at the IRS was, in essence, today, because they didn't like the way that he handled that he objected to certain measures that the president and the White House wanted to do with regard to tax audits, likely of the president's enemies.
Yeah. And, you look at some of the back and forth. I wonder what you, as a DOJ veteran, thought of Blanche trying to sort of drape himself in the credibility of these other people, some of whom are resigning in protest or having their careers railroaded, over what are, again, not a left or right, not a red-blue thing, but baseless cases floundering in the grand jury, cases tossed by independent judges and Republican appointees. That's context for this exchange. Take a look with White House.
When for the first time in history there's an inquiry into fraud upon the court committed by the Department of Justice, the silence from the department in response to that is deafening, Mr. Blanche. This seems to be the most troubled Department of Justice in history.
The Department of Justice works hard. The prosecutors work hard every day, and I appreciate the hand-picked words that you have behind you right now, but that's not reflective of the 100,000 indictments and informations that have been filed to do the work that I talked about earlier today.
Okay, so tomorrow night, Donald Trump will presumably carnival bark to the nation about election fraud. But in today's top story, Trump gets headed off at the pass by the one guy who has a stake in the shell game and has the balls to call him out. It happened last night on the briefing with Jen Psaki, and the allegation as to why Trump is obsessed with Georgia. Well, it's not only shocking, but it's also spot on, as you are about to see. Welcome to Occupy Democrats, and please hit that subscribe button if you agree with me that from Maine to Georgia, this election is not about policy, but about decency.
Does there need to be accountability on DHS from Congress here?
I don't know anything about this event. Okay, I was a little busy yesterday, so I'm going to reserve judgment. I know that there was a tragic shooting, and I'm not going to comment on it because I don't know. And you guys can mock me for not knowing that. I worked about 22 hours the last few days, and I did not get the briefing on that yet.
No doubt that ICE needs to improve its performance, but those who are calling for ICE to be abolished altogether are ignoring absolutely vital safety work that ICE does.
Senator Collins wrote the blank check to allow these officers to conduct themselves in the way that they have in Maine in the first place. And she's the one who's poured resources into it. And just because now that there's live footage of the atrocities that she has enabled, doesn't make it better than preventing them.
Yeah, hopefully that tragedy cost that witch her career, because that would be fair and just. Which brings us to our featured story today from the briefing with Jen Psaki last night. She was joined by the brutally honest and fearless Senator Jon Ossoff, and what he has to say about Trump's obsession with Georgia is just amazing. It's an obsession that began in a desperate attempt to strong-arm Georgia's Secretary of State. Let's remember, whatever he alleges tomorrow, he's the one caught on tape, orange-handed, trying to rig the election in his favor. I'm rubber, you're glue. Whatever you say, bounce off me and sticks to.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Mr. Secretary, was the president here asking you for exactly what he wanted, one more vote than his opponent?
What I knew is that we didn't have any votes to find. We had continued to look. We investigated, like I just shared the numbers with you. There were no votes to find. That was an accurate count that had been certified. And as our general counsel said, there was no shredding of ballots.
Sounds like election fraud to me, for sure. Yeah, maybe he's going to confess tomorrow night, huh? Fat chance. No, Trump is hell-bent on disrupting the next election by casting doubt on the last election. And our featured story today, endangered Senator Jon Ossoff drops the gloves and heart punches Trump, hitting at the core of his obsession with Georgia. As you'll see, Donald Trump was then and is today a dishonest and desperate man.
And I watched you this morning and you said, well, there was no criminality, but I mean, all of this stuff is very dangerous stuff. When you talk about no criminality, I think it's very dangerous for you to say that.
Secretary Raffensperger, you wrote about this in your book, and you said, quote, I felt then and still believe today that this was a threat. Others obviously thought so too, because some of Trump's more radical followers have responded as if it was their duty to carry out this threat. Please tell us what you, your wife, even your daughter-in-law experienced regarding threats from Trump's more radical followers.
Well, after the election, my email, my cell phone was doxxed, and so I was getting texts all over the country, and then eventually my wife started getting the text, and hers typically came in as sexualized texts, which were disgusting. And then some people broke into my daughter-in-law's home, and my son has passed, and she's a widow and has 2 kids, and so we're very concerned about her safety also.
Deplorable MAGA cowards. Man. Now, before we get to Senator Jon Ossoff's stone-cold assessment of Trump's vile motivations regarding the Georgia election, let's listen once again to real fraud in action.
So what are we going to do here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
A break? Well, you didn't get one then, and you're not getting one now. So this serial falsifier is going to get on TV tomorrow and claim election fraud? Well, last night, Senator Jon Ossoff laid out the stark black and white issue that drives the bulbous orange bully. This is so bad it's good.
He's kind of obsessed with Georgia, Trump is. It's also, he just went in and took voting machines from Fulton County, sent Tulsi Gabbard in there. We all remember her lurking behind the pillars there. Why is he obsessed with Georgia? Why?
In my view, he's obsessed with Georgia because he can't get over the fact that it was black voters and black political power who were instrumental to his defeat in Georgia and in a number of crucial battleground states. But look, there's talk that he might try to declare me and Raphael Warnock illegitimate senators. Obviously, the president has no power to do that, but he does have the power to try to intimidate people. He's demonstrated his will to abuse power. I expect him to use whatever he puts out there on Thursday as a pretext either for some attempted unconstitutional use of federal power to interfere in the election, or to give his proxies and loyalists in state and local jurisdictions some cover for whatever they might attempt, or to lay the groundwork for challenging the result. And the bottom line is that this is a real and live threat to voting rights in the United States right now.
Hey, Jagger, let's close out today with one of the most poignantly stark images that totally captures the reality of Donald Trump's MAGA America.
Joining us, former acting assistant attorney general for national security at the DOJ and MS Now legal analyst Mary McCord, MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin, host of The Beat, and MS Now chief legal reporter Ari Melber, and New York Times White House correspondent and MS Now contributor Peter Baker. All right, Ari, I'm going to start with you. Chuck Schumer called that slip, the I'm his lawyer slip, Freudian. What do you think?
Well, as you know, Freud believed that the unconscious mind was ultimately often more powerful and important than our actual conscious words. And the Freudian slip, the joke, was a reveal. So if you want to use that analysis, yeah, it sounded like that because he acts like he's his lawyer. He doesn't act like an independent attorney general. I thought the Republicans mostly tried to sort of paper over and kind of confuse some of these issues today. I thought Mr. Blanche had a poor hand that he played effectively because his style, his demeanor, his sort of, people saw it, his sort of assertively cool mode with both sides of the aisles questioning. Yeah, some might find it smug, others might find it even keeled, depends whether you like him. But that whole mode helped to try to detract from the reality that we are in a rule of law crisis, that he is part of that problem, a corruption crisis, where he hasn't done anything to deal with investigating and holding accountable corruption inside the government. Right now, he could appoint a special counsel. He could uphold law enforcement and anti-corruption parts of the DOJ. He hasn't done that on the job. And to the contrary, he's tried to hand out money to MAGA allied criminals, and then only under court pressure and Republican pressure backed off. And even then, as you saw with Cornyn, he just couldn't say, we're not going to do it, and therefore we're going to dissolve this agreement. And the whole thing is a scam because the lawyers you refer to are Trump's lawyers. So this idea of, oh, well, I wonder what they might do and what he referred to enforcing it. So I thought he got through the hearing, but I don't think he accorded himself with any great integrity.
Mary?
I agree with Ari. I would also say, he was very hyper-technical in his responses, too, so that he could be perceived potentially to people who are not as deep in it as those of us at the table are. He could be perceived to be answering a question, but he was doing so in such a hyper-technical way that it didn't really reveal anything about, his real answer. And I would also say we have more than just sort of him failing to investigate corruption within the department elsewhere. He's part of the corruption, right? I mean, what you were just talking about, Ari, the whole quote unquote settlement agreement of a collusive lawsuit as found by Judge Williams just in an opinion on Monday was horribly corrupt. I mean, a corruption that led to not just this weaponization fund, this slush fund to pay out money to so-called victims of weaponization, but the complete and absolute civil and criminal immunity, not just for past tax liability, as Todd Blanche indicated, but for anything brought by any federal department or agency. That is what it says. He denied that, but it could be investigations based on facts up until the date of the settlement on May 15th that any department or agency could engage in. So it's total and complete civil and criminal immunity.
What did you make of John Cornyn really going after him on the settlement wording, the language? He put up a poster that had the language up on display, and he walked through it, as we just played a moment ago, with Todd Blanche. What do you make of that?
Well, Cornyn was the only Republican I saw that really did push, I think, Todd Blanche on anything with respect to his performance as a deputy attorney general. And, you know, the fact that Blanche still denied what this settlement addendum does, even while the senator pointed out the language.
The
was
words
pretty
in front of him,
shocking to
yeah.
me. Yes, the words are pretty clear. And I don't know if he never read the addendum. He denied later in an exchange with Ted Cruz, even knowing who typed it up when he was asked who wrote. No, I'm sorry, not with Ted Cruz, with who was that with? With somebody. I listened to all of these. Yes, Adam Schiff. That's right. Thank you, Lisa. You know, he denied knowing who, quote unquote, typed it up, but somebody had to come up with its content. And his is the only name on that addendum.
Lisa.
Well, I think there's no question that Todd Blanche is smart. And the reason I say that is to go back to Mary's point about sort of the hyper-technical interpretations of questions. I saw that happen time and time again, and I want to give you and our viewers a few examples. He was asked by Alex Padilla about the possibility that January 6 defendants would still seek compensation through a federal law known as the Federal Tort Claims Act. The way that works is you submit a claim on a pre-existing form, and then if you don't get a settlement from the Department of Justice within a particular period of time, then you can bring it to litigation. And so when he was asked, can you commit that you will not pay out January 6 defendants through the Federal Tort Claims Act, his answer was like, I can't block people from filing claims. Are you talking about the litigation? He never would say that this department would commit that it will not pay out on those claims. There was the whole, I don't know who typed it up, about the tax settlement exchange with Schiff. And then Cory Booker pressed him about the arrest of Ras Baraka outside Delaney Hall. That's the episode that led to the arrest and now the prosecution of LaMonica McIver, the member of Congress from New Jersey. And there is body camera footage on which an agent is basically saying it's time to arrest Mayor Baraka. It's been per order of the Deputy Attorney General. He's referring to Todd Blanche. He asked Todd Blanche, did you in fact order Mayor Baraka's arrest? And he said, well, I didn't order it. I authorized it. So there was a lot of hyper-technical, picayune-ish language today that shows Todd Blanche knows how to answer a question, but there were lots of unsatisfactory answers.
Todd Blanche sat in front of senators today for 5 hours in his Senate confirmation hearing to be Attorney General. What did we learn? Joining us, Democratic Senator from New Jersey, Cory Booker. Senator, thanks for joining us again. What did you learn about Todd Blanche?
Well, I learned that he is going to be the president's lawyer. I learned that he's going to be the guy that when the president tells him to go after his political enemies, he will, the president's sword. And when he wants the president to be, when the president wants him to protect him from just inquiry, from investigation, from accountability, that he's going to do that. This is a guy who has proven in his short time as acting director and in his time as the number 2 in that office that he will subvert justice for the will of the president.
What did you think of this moment right here? This is Senator Kennedy questioning him, lobbing him a softball. Here is his answer.
Are you and President Trump friends?
I'm his lawyer, was his lawyer, and now I'm the Deputy Attorney General. So I met him as his criminal defense attorney. I'm not sure there's very many people who have ever had a criminal defense attorney who calls that person their friend. I now have a...
Well, let me put it this way. Are you enemies?
No, we're not enemies at all.
Leader Schumer called that Freudian. What did you hear?
I heard him telling the truth and then trying to quickly correct and subvert again. Look, that's how he views himself, to protect the president. There's no greater example of this than what he did with the Epstein files. Remember, he went to do the unbelievable thing of having meetings over 2 days with Ghislaine Maxwell, talking to her directly, and then afterwards she got into something that sex offenders, child predators do not have happen to them, put into a camp-like a facility with the lowest possible security, and was treated like a special guest. That violates BOP, Bureau of Prisons protocols. Now, why did she get all that special treatment? I asked him point blank. Was it because she gave you evidence that led to prosecuting more people? No, that's not happening. And then he dared to tell me that he was just very concerned about her safety. Well, he wasn't concerned about the safety of the women whose identities, addresses, phone numbers, and images of the survivors of Epstein that they did not redact and that they released to the public. They did redact a lot of powerful men in protecting them, but they re-traumatized these women and seemed to be only concerned about Ghislaine Maxwell's safety and not theirs.
In his testimony today, and in your observation of him so far, his actions that you've seen, you've detailed, do you believe he has a red line? I ask that because Bill Barr, who was accused of acting as President Trump's personal attorney in the first administration, he had a red line. He would not follow Donald Trump's orders regarding trying to overturn the 2020 election. Do you think that Todd Blanche has his own?
No, this is the difference between Donald Trump in his first term and in his second term. He's gotten rid of most of those people that would stand up to him on matters of principle and matters of law. We know this because of the outrageousness that's been called out by people across the spectrum when it comes to things like trying to persecute and prosecute Comey for the seashells he placed on the sand. This is somebody who has shown he has no druthers about doing outrageous, unprecedented subversions of the law if Donald Trump tells him to do those things. And that's why today wasn't just a partisan exercise. This wasn't just unfortunate to have him there. When you give someone like that the position of the highest law enforcement officer in the land, when you give them that much power, this is dangerous to America and Americans.
I was having a conversation with Ken Delanian a moment ago on this show, and he said Todd Blanche does actually push back in private, push back on the James Comey investigation, saying that it's not a strong case. That being said, he did still pursue it. James Comey has still been indicted. So I'm going to invoke Bill Burr once again, and I'm going to ask this. Is he, and I'm taking a liberty here, but is he the best bad option for Attorney General?
No, we can't capitulate to what's happening in our country. Whether it's a war overseas, that he's been months at this war, never come to Congress where war powers lie, whether it's the normalization of the killing of Americans in our streets, or whether it's an Attorney General who is further traumatizing victims.
I'm joined now by Senator Adam Schiff. Senator, I wanted to get your reaction first and foremost to the hearing that just took place with Todd Blanche, who is, of course, vying to be the next Attorney General. Did you get the impression, after having watched him, that he was actually going to be adherent to the Constitution as opposed to continuing his job as Donald Trump's personal criminal defense attorney?
No, he made it very clear that through his actions, he is really representing the person of the president, not the American people. And that's the central question at the heart of this hearing. And that is, who's representing the public in all of that the Justice Department is doing? So when it came to the Epstein files, for example, he took no responsibility for the fact the court has said the Justice Department is in violation of the law. He was asked whether he would apologize to the victims. And he tried to obfuscate things by saying, well, I feel bad whenever somebody's victimized by a crime. And it was pointed out to him, no, the one who did the victimization, in addition to Epstein, was the Justice Department in releasing victims' names, photos, personal information. Will you apologize for your role in that? He very begrudgingly did. He wouldn't agree to meet with the victims. He initially claimed that he couldn't meet with the victims. which is preposterous. And then when we went to other matters like the slush fund or the bogus sham IRS settlement, he was once again defending the president, really not the interests of the American people.
I thought what was interesting was his claim that when he was asked by one senator if he would just get this over with, release the files, just, get it done, his initial words out of his mouth were, that would be illegal. Is it illegal or against the law for Todd Blanche to release the entirety of the remaining Epstein files? And of course, I'm not talking about victim information, but there are still 3 million documents that haven't yet been released.
So he is under a legal obligation to release these documents, not to withhold any of them because they might embarrass people or expose the identities of powerful people who were perpetrating any of these crimes that Epstein and his Confederates were responsible for. There may be some small set of material that is grand jury material where he would have to go before a court. But we know that there's millions of files still not yet released. And no one has any confidence, and not the judge that oversees the case, no one has any confidence that Blanche and the department are trying to do anything but protect these Epstein offenders. Todd Blanche today tried to argue that Donald Trump wanted these files released and he was pushing for it, when we all know how hard he worked to stop the bipartisan legislation that mandated that disclosure. So his testimony was really duplicitous, particularly when it involved the Epstein files, but also with the whole weaponization of the Justice Department. At times he would brag, like when he goes before the conservative CPAC convention, about firing all of the prosecutors and the FBI agents who investigated his client, the president. And then when I asked him about that, he said, "Oh, that wasn't me. That wasn't me." He took no responsibility for it. And that was what we saw throughout the hearing. It was this very duplicitous Todd Blanche giving verbal approval of department policies, but in his actions demonstrating he had really no adherence to the rule of law. His only loyalty is to the person of the president.
And why it must be stopped in its tracks this fall. Please like, share, take care out there, and watch your back.
I am the least racist person there is anywhere in the world.
Trump's golf course just got slapped with a brutal bomb, and it is beyond ironic. Donald Trump has spent the last 50 years selling you one single idea, that his name bolted to the front of a building means luxury. The finest marble, the finest gold, the finest everything.
In building, what I do best in life is build. I build buildings really well. And under budget and ahead of schedule. That's what I do.
Or so he says. But this week, government inspectors toured some of the properties that have his name on them. And what they filed reads less like a 5-star review and more like a biohazard report. What's up, everybody? It's Andrew, and we're going to do this tour property by property because you're going to want to see each of them. But the last stop is genuinely hard to believe. First up, his crown jewel in New Jersey and what was exposed over the last year.
President Trump's Bedminster Golf Club is making headlines that Trump probably won't like. The Somerset County Department of Health just flagged Trump's golf club for 18 health violations in its latest inspection, giving it a score of 32 out of 100 possible points, earning it the lowest grade in the county. Out of 18 violations, 9 were flagged as critical, which means they could result in an unacceptable health risk. Included in the report was 4 hand washing violations, expired milk, and raw meat stored improperly. They earned the club a C grade, which is required to be displayed in a visible location. The inspection occurred May 6th. Forbes was the first outlet to report on Bedminster's health code violations this week.
Expired milk, improperly stored meat, and it earned Trump's favorite weekend getaway the single worst health score in the entire county. Dead last, at a place that he calls a diamond. And believe it or not, that's the nice one, because let's fly 1,000 miles west.
Trump International Hotel and Tower has made some improvements after failing a health inspection. In December, a health inspector cited the downtown Chicago hotel for 6 issues, including flies in the bar and dish areas and improper storage of cold food. They were instructed to have all areas affected by pests checked out by an expert.
Chicago's Trump Tower has agreed to cough up $4.8 million to settle a lawsuit for violating federal and state environmental laws. Friends of the Chicago River and Sierra Club announced the settlement today. The lawsuit said the tower ignored law minimizing impact on aquatic life and did not accurately report its water usage. Trump Tower has agreed to come into compliance with the Clean Water Act and the Illinois Environmental Protection Act. In a statement, a spokesperson said the tower denies wrongdoing and looks forward to supporting the sustainability of the Chicago River.
And that brings us to our breaking story today, because those two hold nothing on D.C. And this week, Donald's property in Washington joined his list of embarrassments. Donald Trump's D.C. golf club was just slapped with multiple health code violations, including bugs, improperly stored raw meat, and prohibited pesticides. The facility was hit with multiple health code violations during an inspection by the county health department. The inspection was conducted on June 30th at Donald Trump's golf club, finding problems at the restaurant, grill, and snack bar areas. Violations include a large quantity of small flies in the storage room near the employee restrooms.
What made this hearing stand out was not merely the partisan clash between Democrats and Republicans. Instead, it centered on a much broader issue that has been debated in Washington for years: whether Americans can continue to trust that the Department of Justice functions independently regardless of which administration is in power. Throughout his questioning of Todd Blanche, Senator Adam Schiff emphasized this concern repeatedly. In Schiff's view, the debate extends far beyond a single nominee or confirmation hearing. He argued that the Attorney General's primary duty is to uphold the Constitution and serve the public interest, rather than advance the personal or political priorities of any president. During the hearing, Schiff frequently cited Blanche's responses as examples of what he believed was a tendency to defend President Trump instead of directly addressing wider concerns about the responsibilities and independence of the Justice Department. These criticisms reflect Schiff's perspective, while Blanche has consistently rejected the suggestion that he would place loyalty to any individual above his obligation to follow the law. The discussion grew more heated when lawmakers shifted their attention to the Jeffrey Epstein files. Schiff maintained that the Justice Department has a responsibility to provide as much transparency as legally possible and questioned whether enough has been done to convince the public that political factors are not influencing decisions about what information is disclosed. Blanche responded by stressing that legal standards, privacy considerations, and procedural requirements must be followed. Their exchange underscored a central challenge facing the Justice Department: finding the right balance between transparency and legal constraints while preserving public trust. At that point, the conversation moved beyond ordinary political disagreements. No matter where people fall on the political spectrum, faith in the justice system depends on the belief that laws are applied fairly and consistently. When citizens begin to suspect that influential figures are treated differently from everyone else, confidence in public institutions can erode. At the same time, allegations by themselves do not establish misconduct. This is precisely why confirmation hearings, investigations, and court proceedings exist: to evaluate evidence, interpret the law, and provide an opportunity for competing arguments to be heard. Schiff also focused on Blanche's previous work as President Trump's personal attorney. He argued that such a close professional relationship naturally raises questions about whether Blanche could remain fully independent if confirmed to a senior Justice Department position. Supporters of Blanche reject that argument, contending that attorneys regularly represent clients without becoming permanently aligned with their interests, and that prior legal representation should not automatically prevent someone from serving in government. This disagreement reflects a larger national debate about how much independence the public should expect from high-ranking government officials and how that independence should be demonstrated. The hearing also highlighted questions of accountability. Schiff insisted that public officials have a responsibility to provide clear and direct answers, particularly when public trust is at stake. He criticized several of Blanche's responses as insufficient or overly cautious, arguing that they failed to address key concerns. Blanche, in contrast, defended both his record and his approach, emphasizing that any actions he would take in office would be based on legal principles and established procedures. The contrast between political scrutiny and legal justification remains one of the defining themes of the confirmation process and is likely to continue shaping the debate in the weeks ahead.